Okay. What's up, everyone? We are at the Blockchain Economic Forum. We are now with Eirini Schlosser. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I greatly appreciate it. So you are with the International Blockchain Investments. You've been there now.
IBI Ventures, yep.
IBI Ventures. And I was just listening to a panel you were on, and it was amazing seeing 6 women on the panel.
It was a blast, absolutely.
I'm in love with seeing women in high positions in technology. I'm like, let's get more of that in the world as soon as possible.
We rarely have it, to be honest. It's something that you really only see, we've only seen it really in the last year, and thankfully it's been starting to grow, and especially it's really indicative of what the quality of the panel that we had today. The women alongside me were fantastic, so it was great to be speaking with them.
Yeah, we've had Tess and Radhika on the show before, and Women in Technology International just happened. We were doing interviews there. You should totally come next year. I need to make sure you
absolutely.
get over there. Because we also need some, we needed some women in blockchain that were at Witty as well. So, okay, now this is the decentralization movement.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people that are like, I want to be part of the decentralization movement. It like gives people so much meaning and purpose to try and be a part of this. Maybe the first question before we talk about kind of like, your background is in investment banking, Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan. Morgan Stanley. And then you went into some AI and food, which is really interesting as well. So maybe over the years, as you became more aware of decentralization, what kind of like drew you to it in the first place? And also, like, what were your earlier kind of thoughts about it before? Like, let's talk about before today, before the present.
Sure. So I think, I got into blockchain the same way that most people I know got in through initially just getting exposed to cryptocurrencies. And I think what made decentralization more palpable for us was understanding how smart contracts worked. And then it was basically mind-blowing in the sense that you could really apply the process of how a decentralized blockchain or a decentralized ledger, more specifically, could be applied to many different industries. And so I probably started to move out of any type of focus on more cryptocurrencies and much more on how the technology could be disrupting essentially how the world is working as well as people's philosophies. And it's interesting that you mentioned, the decentralization movement, because I think there's different factions of it, which is it's extremely interesting to watch how it unfolds. So there you have the very hardline believers in that everything should be decentralized, and I think it was one of the biggest lessons for me was realizing with a lot of these very intense debates on decentralized governance that there's a lot of, right now we've captured data on humans that are essentially what we see and what we click. We really haven't captured human behavior to understand what actually drives the dynamics. And this also brings in a little bit of, how effective is artificial intelligence as well. But from the blockchain side, in terms of building in decentralized governance, I started getting much more into the school of thought that was too extreme. Not because I don't believe that it's possible, but I think we're probably around 8 to 10 years away of collecting enough data on that. And so I started really actually diving down the rabbit hole of neuroscience.
Oh, sweet.
And how, but more, I think that even just neuroscience is not really capturing the entire picture. I think it's gathering all of the biomarkers and as well as the qualitative data of what people truly experience, and how do you integrate that into teams. And so that's where
into teams for
with the decentralized governance, kind of the scary part of decentralized governance was that essentially you were allowing the code to dictate what your performance was and what the result of each action was. And a lot of situations where teams are performing, it's gray. And so how people are managed, how returns are managed, how decentralized applications are managed in a way, because it's not just the code, right? To be able to scale something to a mass market, you need to be able to communicate it effectively. And yes, that might result in great advertising, but it's really just packaging it in a way, and how do we actually incentivize humans to want to use it and to essentially adopt the technology. And that's something that I don't think a decentralized team can do. And a decentralized team can't necessarily be motivated in the right way yet, because we don't have enough data on how teams and companies and generally organizations work. Does that make sense?
I was not expecting you to jump into understanding human behavior with blockchain technology and understanding the brain and how, psychology and how inner workplace dynamics and even families and relationships, all that stuff, because that is something that people don't talk about that often here in decentralization space. So, okay, cool. So, but how did that initially become your draw?
It really became almost like a passion project on the side of investing on the venture capital side, because most venture capital firms will tell you that they're really investing in the team. And so when you look at a lot of these blockchain projects which are decentralized, I mean, it's from a community of developers that you don't necessarily, they're all over the world. There's not necessarily a strict organizational approach to it. And at the bottom line, it's not just the code. Building a business or an infrastructure and expanding it to a mass market really requires a multidisciplinary approach. And so the diversity of teams is something that I think we haven't really been able to decentralize yet. And so it's kind of it's a natural effect of the conversations you have when it's a team of engineers and they're saying, we've got another 1,000 engineers, and we're asking, well, who's doing the marketing, or how are you communicating this to an audience? How does blockchain or decentralized technologies disrupt the world? And they haven't really, I think, articulated a great answer yet, but I think we're close.
Okay, so
sorry, I'm a deep dive.
That was very deep dive, and it's a very exciting dive, because I think understanding how to maximize interpersonal dynamics is going to help us maximize our potential. So I think that's very important, and it's very interesting that you went there. I was not expecting that. That's very cool. And we'll unpack that a little more as we go. It seems as though you are. Now, is the International Blockchain Investment Ventures, IBI Ventures, is that fund?
It is a fund. We are focused in more of the short term on how we can essentially invest in companies that have fantastic technology and how that technology can be integrated or sold to different enterprises. And I think that's definitely the lowest hanging fruit in the sense that, most companies desperately need an infrastructure upgrade, and there are situations where decentralized technologies make sense, and maybe it's like a semi-private blockchain, or it's a blockchain that is public, but there's enough encryption and security to get enterprises comfortable in a more efficient process. But there's also a lot of enterprise technologies that need to be upgraded without blockchain. They literally just need, centralized cloud systems, essentially, or they don't necessarily need it to be, set up with a group of another 300 organizations or limitless number of organizations. And I think that's identifying the difference of where blockchain is necessary and where it can add a lot of value, and where it's not necessary at this point in time, and another technology might just be sufficient. Or better.
That's really important to bring up. I think everybody's trying to blockchain everything and decentralize everything. And maybe other technologies are better used for now in that space instead. And I guess this is a question that we ask, and I think it'd be interesting to ask you, what do you think shouldn't be decentralized?
Interesting. So I think, there's a lot of companies that they already have the data, they already have the reach, and there are certain aspects of their platforms that can be decentralized. And one thing, I would love to see decentralized would be something like a participation in music on Spotify. I would love to get paid in tokens for the quality of the playlist that I'm creating. And essentially, I'm allowing Spotify's AI to become better by providing that data. Obviously, it can be provided with other music platforms as well. One thing I would say that it wouldn't make sense to necessarily put on blockchain would definitely be at the moment where we need very, I would say, high-speed processing systems. And sometimes maybe it's a gradual switch where you're starting off with something that's more centralized because you can ensure the speed and the quality. And as the decentralized network grows larger, you can start to replace it. I think that's where just making a full hard split and changing to blockchain just off the bat, it might not make sense. It definitely needs to be more of a gradual shift than trying to just get everyone on blockchain at once, because it won't be fast. We're going to be looking at a lot of crashes and also the protocols and what's being built. We really need to get a solid infrastructure in place first before everything starts moving to blockchain.
So with the best processing speeds that are available today, those remaining centralized to complete the tasks that they need to do for now. Mm-hmm. And then you're looking at the greatest impact that you can make with investing. Mm-hmm. And does that kind of piggyback on your initial point about human behavior? Is that kind of where you're very focused with your... How big is the fund? How many people?
So we're 4 people on the team. We're targeting about a $250 million raise. We're in the process, actually, we already are about at our first $50 million in commitments.
Congrats.
Thank you. It's been a fun process. So yeah. And I think, with the fund, it's really just understanding what phases are going to come first and trying to find where the largest impact and disruption will happen. And so where I think I would expect to come, obviously we're already saying, enterprise is probably coming first because it's the easiest to sell to a smaller amount of parties versus trying to mass market this. And also the enterprise are actually asking for it. So the consumers, it's almost like when the first, Apple iPod came out, we didn't know that we needed an MP3 player that was the size of an iPod. So it's really, blockchain is coming and helping consumers in a way that they don't even know that they need the problem solved yet. And I think, so for example, one thing that I was explaining to a friend of mine was, she's very focused on where her food is sourced and what ingredients are in it. And I was explaining how blockchain can solve that. And she goes, really? That's what blockchain can solve for me? I go, yeah. And that hasn't really been communicated, and it's going to take a lot more marketing effort and more of a wider industry approach on the technology side to get people comfortable with how blockchain can make their lives easier. And so I think that's a little bit later stage, but we're already looking for the right teams to do that.
Come a little more center shot.
Yep.
So it's easier to get into blockchain with an enterprise. Mm-hmm. And because it seems as though corporations, organizations are more quickly able to adapt in decentralization technologies into their organization to maximize their revenue, maximize mm-hmm. their transparency, maximize supply chain, all these different types of things. Whereas for individuals, it's not only not as lucrative, but it's also more difficult to get 10,000 people to sign up for something than it is to get one organization that supports 10,000 people to sign up. So what investments are you making into the blockchain enterprise space?
Sure. So we're definitely looking at traceability. So I spent actually the weekend with a group who's looking at building it into the automobile manufacturing parts systems, and which is actually, it's very interesting because you have a market right now which is very fragmented by different suppliers, and of the automobile parts, if one company is at capacity, they'll often overload an outsourced type of production to competitors. And then it's basically overlay that with the fact that recalls happen. And so what happens when a recall happens, obviously you have regulators getting involved. The parts are traced back to the original manufacturer, and so they need to know exactly where those parts came from, what the timestamp was, what the parameters were in terms of how the process was, how the part was produced, whether it was heat or what type of exposure did that part have, and then identifying what other parts would be similar. And that's something where blockchain can solve that, especially a private blockchain. And what's really important there is the fact that the big boundary, the barrier to entry is the fact that their suppliers and competitors don't want to share information. And so there's this asymmetry mm-hmm. between the groups of them where they need to know that the blockchain will ensure that the information and data is only available to groups that are on a need-to-know basis, whether it's regulators
access control.
Exactly. It's access control, higher encryption. And so the biggest barrier for enterprises is making sure that they're comfortable with the privacy and the encryption and security of that data.
Because normally in a centralized manner, they're very comfortable.
Exactly.
But with a decentralized manner, much less so.
Yeah. Even in reality, the decentralized way might even be way more secure.
Yeah.
They can't verify that. And we are speaking with people who are not necessarily developers, and they're not as particularly blockchain developers, they need to, it's a bigger barrier to get comfortable there.
All right. How about in this example, are you then funding the enterprise software that's enabling the steel company to have their steel be passed on to the automotive manufacturers, or their aluminum and carbon fiber? Or are we talking about the automotive manufacturer is the one that's taking the enterprise software that you're funding and then putting all of the different parts that they receive from the manufacturers in? Yeah.
It's really, it's a multi-party approach, and so you really need to get the entire supply chain involved. And that's why, and the other issue is that the individual companies which would love to do it themselves, the other companies won't trust them to do it. So it either needs to be something spun off or quarantined and has nothing to do with one entity, and it's more of an independent entity that's coming and providing a decentralized service where all participants are incentivized to participate, essentially. All parties are incentivized to participate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Now, that's one of many examples. Now, maybe give us another relatable example.
Sure. So another relatable example would be traceability of food origins. So
And you're making an investment here already.
So we're in due diligence process with a few types of these companies.
Okay.
Yeah. And so another one is food traceability, which initially the technology that they're applying it for is essentially high quality or let's say European Union type protected foods, which are specific, and which might be wine, it might be champagne, it might be, for example, you can only have feta that's in Greece. Anywhere outside of Greece cannot call it feta. And so when you go abroad,
Your pronunciations are funny.
Sorry, I'm Greek. Feta. I'm like trying to say it in a way that everyone else can understand it, because I'm Greek, so I'm like, yeah.
I heard it. Feta.
Exactly.
And I heard this is also similar for like caviar and Kobe beef.
Caviar, exactly. And so I think one of the battles that they're tackling is that these guys are specifically from Italy, and so they were seeing that in China there's a lot of counterfeit, or not just China, but many countries around the world, there's a lot of counterfeit products that say this is from Italy, but it's not truly from Italy. And so traceability to country of origin would be their initial lowest hanging fruit to tackle in food, but it's also important in parts, even commodities. If you're looking at where, from a geopolitical perspective of being able to trace where oil is coming from, it's extremely important, and as well to the, whether it's the United States infrastructure or just general geopolitics. And so that's something that blockchain can definitely solve. And I think, especially when you have entrepreneurs or the developers that are very focused on the technology, they've looked at it and said, okay, we can do it with food first because we already have an existing business in the food space. And so it's an easy step in. As a VC, we're looking at it and saying, okay, where else can this technology be easily applied and packaged? Yeah,
and that's why you picked original equipment manufacturing. That's why you picked food traceability, these very relatable ones.
Exactly. If you break down blockchain, I think there's probably 4 areas that we're looking at. The first, which I've really been getting into, is identity. And it can be identity of things, meaning the food, the auto parts, et cetera. It can be identity of people, which is their driver's license, their medical records, et cetera. And that's all kind of this similar technologies in terms of the blockchain, decentralized support, but it's applied to different industry cases and use cases. And then you have, so identity being the first one, the second being incentivization. And so that's where you can have a lot of people being paid with utility tokens and incentivized to participate in a platform in a way where they're incentivized not to cheat and to provide the best value to that platform. Mm-hmm. There's a few use cases there, but I think that's where, the Ethereum mining and a lot of the utility tokens are essentially making sense. Utility tokens built on that are making more sense, and also in the gaming space as well. And then you have the custodial issue, so what happens where the identity needs to get transferred. Yep. And that's something that there's quite a few groups trying to tackle. I think it's in more of the early stages. And the last portion is security. So I think blockchain can do a lot with security and encryption. It's not something that we've particularly dove into at IBI Ventures yet. We're much more on the traceability side and then incentivization.
I like your pillars. Your breakdown's great. And I think that having a kind of like a philosophical or an ethical breakdown like that, both one that understands the economy and understands the way things are moving, but also one that's based in values or ethics around like trying to do it for the purpose of making the world better is really important along the way. Okay, so I would normally also ask, what are you most looking forward to, but it seems like you already answered that quite a lot.
I'm looking forward to my vacation at some point. No, I'm kidding.
You said you go to Greece so much.
I used to. I grew up going to Greece all the time, and then investment banking, I still had an element of vacation. And then after being an entrepreneur, you realize that you love working so much that you just forget
to vacay.
And on all of your extra expenses are like, oh, I have extra dollars this month. I can get another developer to do more for me. So new features.
New teammates.
So, this year I vowed to myself that while everyone else is taking vacation in August, I will also be taking vacation in August. So that is the plan.
That's a good vow. It's important to be able to balance in a little bit of travel into life, but you're totally right though. Entrepreneurs end up loving what they do so much.
Well, I think it's almost to their demise in many cases. So I know I went through it. Most entrepreneurs that I know went through it, where you just get into this deep depression where not everyone's in deep depression, but I mean, your self-identity is so closely tied to your business that you forget that you exist if that business doesn't exist. And so finding that balance, for me, actually, it was
That's
just...
That's a pretty good way to put it. Do I even exist if this channel doesn't exist?
Exactly. You're just so closely tied to it. And for me, it was just really finding hobbies. And so actually I started DJing like for private, like my friends, my friends and at home. And I'm the crazy person that DJs my own birthday, but music was really
DJ your own birthday.
Yeah. Music was really my balance out of all of this.
Okay. I have a question that we like to ask on the show a lot. Sure. It seems as though wealth inequality is being exacerbated by exponential technology, and the poor people in the world are slowly coming up. Meanwhile, the top are just exploding in wealth. What do you think is going to happen with wealth inequality?
That's tough. To be honest, I think the entire ICO space was driven by that. And I know alongside many other female entrepreneurs that I've spoken with, have all faced kind of, and it's not just women, it's people that are from a different background. We've faced a huge barrier to getting first-time founder funding. And I think that's something where, most investors around the US are generally follow-on investors. And so who are the ones that take the lead and take the risk on an entrepreneur? They're generally in a very small ecosystem, and they invest in a very small group of individuals. And so, myself coming from an investment banking background, and it's Morgan Stanley, and I've worked on $60 billion worth of deals, it was not still part of that network. And they were saying, what do you think? You're an investment banker and you can do a tech startup. And, I had a much more experience than an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old who might be a genius, but they hadn't lived through enough life. And so I think the balance out of who people are investing in as first-time entrepreneurs, I do see that changing, and I think it's for the better. And that will probably also drive the shift from the explosive 0.001% of growth to more of the wider minting of millionaires. So, I think what was an interesting phrase I heard lately was fiat billionaire or crypto billionaire. And it was literally a question asked, but I think the crypto billionaire speaks to the fact that there are people that are coming from non-traditional backgrounds and places that you wouldn't have expected normally.
Yeah, that and the way that you answered the question, I don't think we've had answered in quite that way yet on the show, that there's massive potential for funding to be given to first-time entrepreneurs that are usually passed on because of the just the massive amount of different epic technologies that are going on in different places in the world getting involved. So it's actually, interestingly enough, could help uplift the low SES, middle SES faster if first-time entrepreneurs get funded more. Okay. A couple power round questions. Do you think we're alone in the cosmos?
No. Do you want a power round, or do you want more?
Yeah, expand a little more.
I think that would be extremely egotistical of the human race to think that we're the only ones out here.
And then, do you think there are advanced civilizations that are roaming out there, or what do you think?
That's an interesting question. I try not to form opinions on things I can't prove. That's
why I said think.
Yeah, I can think.
What do you imagine?
I would imagine it's still an opinion. I would think that there is, because we're just kind of a speck of dot in the universe, and so it would really be statistically impossible for there not to be.
Do you also feel like you're a speck of dot as well? Like, you know, when you like really tune into your heart and your mind and your body and everything, do you feel like a speck, or do you feel like a divine creature? Like, what do you
No,
feel?
I definitely feel like a speck, and I'm happy feeling like a speck.
Do you balance that out with like the divinity as well, though?
No, I think everyone everyone is a divine speck. That's what I would say.
A divine speck. That's awesome. All right, we'll go with that. Do you think there is a designer to the universe?
That's an interesting question. I think everyone has their own opinion of some type of force that, you know, depending on how you culturally look at it. It could be some cultures which happen to be more individual focused will view it as an individual. Other cultures will view it as something that's more of a collective, combined, let's say, source of energy power. I think whatever makes people kind of reach a state of peace and they're happy with and balanced, that's probably where, yeah, to each his own is probably my opinion there. But yes.
What do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
That's tough because it's really experiences. So it's not really a thing, I would say.
What experiences are the most beautiful?
Friends, family. Yeah, I mean, that's very difficult to define because it really just depends on what the situation is. And it's usually the experience that you don't expect, I would say.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, or a memory that you realize was valuable, or that was just it was such a unique moment that it would never happen again, and you realize it much later in time. That's probably the most beautiful because it is what it is, and it's not,
yeah, you give it
it's not coming back. So it's almost beautiful because of its scarcity.
Yeah, and a lot of the time we give experiences no love. We just say, whatever. And then later on, like a couple months or years later or something, we're like, whoa, that was so amazing. It helped me out so much. And then you
even
bless
what we
it.
thought was the worst experience, it usually ends up being the best.
I love that one, yeah.
That's actually been the most beautiful things I've experienced, when it was something that I thought was just, and it was truly so much pain, but then you end up being just so thankful for it. So I think that's probably the most beautiful experiences in life.
Yeah, I've been starting to talk more about how I went to jail and being there, like thinking about it over and over again. It was just like such a and but like really quickly I started being like, fuck, that was amazing. Like I learned so much. It helped me so much with who I am today, what I know today, and especially how we just want to help people that are that have made mistakes, you know, because everyone makes mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes. So, and it's just, I don't think there's not, I don't really believe in mistakes even existing. I think there's some people that do things that are legitimately wrong, but in terms of like mistakes, it shouldn't stop people from doing learning on that mistake and then improving upon it. So. Yeah.
I'm really happy that our conversation tree ended up going in like a couple cool directions along the
absolutely.
blockchain investments route. Yeah. That was super fun. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everybody, if you guys had a good time, please make sure we'll put the link in the bio.
Sure.
Okay, we'll put the links in the bio. Please check out the links. Also, like, comment, subscribe. Also, share the content with other people. Go tell 2 people about what you learned today. They'll tell 2 people, and we'll keep going. Join us on Patreon so we can keep doing cool things like coming to the Blockchain Economic Forum and interviewing really smart people. Woo!
Thank you.
Yes, you're so welcome. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. Peace.
Bye.